Good morning and welcome to Psalms in Hebrew and Comparative Translations. Today today obviously you can tell from my dress it is Purim and but I figured why not study Psalms on Purim? Well, there's nothing that says that you can't. And uh and so here we are. We're going to study Psalms, and we will also meet next week on the 10th of March to study Psalm 74.
That's my birthday.
We'll meet that is correct. That's Mark's birthday. And we'll meet also on the 17th, which is St. Patrick's Day, according to my calendar. Not that I usually follow the saints' days, but all right. And we'll meet on the 17th. And then the 24th, I'm going to be at a conference in Florida, so we will not meet on the 24th. But we will meet the next 3 weeks. All right. Today we're studying Psalm 73. And um and so let me share my screen. Just like usual, we'll read the psalm out loud in Hebrew and in a couple of English translations. And the first reading of the psalm is to sort of feel how it impacts you emotionally, to think to yourself, wow, what is rising up in me when I read this psalm? And then to ask the two follow-up questions. One is, what do you think the mindset of the person who wrote this psalm, the psalmist, in this case, Asaph, right? What do you think is the mindset that Asaph has in this moment? And then also, if you were going to use this psalm as a tefillah, as a prayer, uh, how would you use it? In what context would you use it? Ah, Natalie. All right. She's still connecting to the audio. Natalie, it's great to see you. You're muted. But I did want to tell you, you're on my list of Mishloach Manot to deliver. So I'm going to actually see you a little later this morning if you're at home. I'm going to pop by with the synagogue Mishloach Manot. All right. Terrific. Let me read out loud in Hebrew. Mizmor le'asaf. Ach tov liYisrael Elohim levarei levav. Vani kimat natayu raglai ka'ayin shupchu ashurai. Ki kineti baholalim shalom rishaim ereh. Ki ein chartzubot lemotam uvari ulam. Ba'amal enosh einemo ve'im adam lo yenuga'u. Lachein anakatmo ga'ava ya'ataf shit chamas lamo. Yatsa mechelev einemo avru maskiot levav. Yamiku vidaberu vara oshek mimarom yidaberu. Shatu vashamayim pihem ulshonam ti halach baaretz. Lachein yashuv amo halom umei malei yimatzu lamo. Ve'amru echa yada el ve'yesh de'a elyon. Hine ele rishaim v'shalvei olam hisgu chayo. Ach rik zikiti livavi va'erchatz binikion kapai va'ehi nagua kol hayom v'tochachti labkarim. Im amarti asapra chemo Hine dor banecha vagaditi va'achashva ladat zot amal hu ve'enai. Ad avo el mikdashei el avina la'achritam. Ach b'chalakot tashit lamo hipaltam lama shuot. Ech hayu l'shama charaga, safu tamu min balahot. Kachalom mehakitz, Adonai ba'ir tzalmam tivzeh, ki yitchametz levavi v'chilyotai eshtonan, v'ani va'ar v'lo eda behemot hayiti imach, v'ani tamid imach, achazta biyad yamini, ba'atzatcha tancheni v'achar kavod tikacheni. Mi li vashamayim ve'imcha lo chafatzti v'aretz. Kala she'eri ulevavi, tzur levavi v'chelki Elohim leolam. Ki hine rechekecha yovedu, hitzmata kol zoneh mimeka. Vani kirvat Elohim li tov, shati badonai Elohim, machsi lesaper kol mal achotecha. A psalm of Asaph. God is truly good to Israel, to those whose heart is pure. As for me, my feet had almost strayed, my steps were nearly led off course, for I envied the wanton. I saw the wicked at ease. Death has no pangs for them. Their body is healthy. They have no part in human travail. They are not afflicted like the rest of humankind. So pride adorns their necks, lawlessness enwraps them as a mantle. Fat shuts out their eyes, their fancies are extravagant. They scoff and plan evil. From their eminence they plan wrongdoing. They set their mouths against heaven and their tongues range over the earth. So they pound this people again and again until they are drained of their very last tear. Then they say, how could God know? Is there knowledge with the Most High? Such are the wicked, ever tranquil. They amass wealth. It was for nothing that I kept my heart pure and washed my hands in innocence, seeing that I have been constantly afflicted, that each morning brings new punishments. Had I decided to say these things, I should have been false to the circle of your disciples. So I applied myself to understand this, but it seemed a hopeless task. Till I entered God's sanctuary and reflected on their fate. You surround them with flattery, you make them fall through blandishments. How suddenly are they ruined, wholly swept away by terrors. When you are roused, you despise their image, as one does a dream after waking, O my sovereign. My mind was stripped of its reason, my feelings were numbed. I was a dolt, without knowledge. I was brutish toward you. Yet I was always with you. You held my right hand. You guided me by your counsel and led me toward honor. Whom else have I in heaven? And having you, I want no one on earth. My body and mind fail, but God is the stay of my mind, my portion forever. Those who keep far from you perish. You annihilate all who are untrue to you. As for me, nearness to God is good. I have made the sovereign God my refuge, that I may recount all your works. All right, we'll read one more. This one from the Rabbi Richard Levy. A Psalm of Asaph. Yes, God is good for Israel, for the wholesome of heart. As for me, my feet had almost strayed. I almost slipped at every step, for I am jealous of the boastful ones. I see the peacefulness of wicked people, for there are no pangs at their passing. Their body is healthy. They do not share the toil of ordinary people. They are not wounded like ordinary human beings. Therefore, pride is a chain around their neck. Violence is a cloak for their frame. Their eyes bulge from corpulence. The fantasies of their heart transgress. They taunt, oppressing by their hurtful words. Their words come as if from on high. They have hurled their mouth to the heavens, and their tongue patrols the earth. Therefore the people return there, and the waters, once full, are emptied out by them. They say, how can God know? Is there knowledge in the Most High? Behold, these are the wicked. Those who are at ease in the world have attained power. So I have purified my heart in vain, scrubbed my hands clean in vain, for I have been plagued all day, chastised every morning. If I said, I will tell my tale this way, look, I would have been faithless to your flocks. When I pondered on how I might ever know this, it became a burden in my eyes, until I'd go into the holy gates of God, when I understood their ultimate undoing. Surely you have set them in slippery places, you have hurled them into the ruins. How they have become a desolation in a moment, finished, diminished, consumed by terrors like a dream when one awakes. Creator, when you arise, you will despise their image. For my heart was fermenting like rising dough. I was stabbed in my inmost parts. But I was a dimwit. I did not know. I was an animal in your presence. Still, I am always with you. You have grasped my right hand. You guide me with your counsel, and afterward you take me with glory. Who but you is there for me in heaven? And being with you, I have no other desires on earth. Though my flesh and my heart be spent, the rock of my heart and my portion is God forever. For behold, those who are far from you shall perish. You destroy all who wander away from you. As for me, the nearness of God is good for me. I have made the superior God my refuge, that I may tell my tale of all your creative works. So, first thoughts, what emotions are brought up by this psalm? What rises in you as you read it or as you hear me read it? Yeah, Natalie, you have to unmute. Wait, Natalie, we can't hear you because you're still muted. You have to unmute. Yeah. The mute and unmute button is usually at the bottom of the screen. But also I clicked it to ask you to unmute, so maybe if you click on that, it will also unmute. There you go.
All right.
Yep.
Um, I s- I could have written this because I wake up every morning. I have to decide which part of my body isn't going to work, and if it's only one part, I'm really happy. But I still go to services every Friday night here, and hope that I can bear the pain and not have more problems than I already have.
Thank you for sharing. So Natalie says, I I really relate to the verses in this psalm, though my flesh and my heart be spent. I relate to um uh
I relate to a God.
uh uh, uh a lot of these psalms, a lot of these verses are about how much for my heart was fermenting like rising dough. I was stabbed in my inmost parts. All of these verses which are about the pain that ordinary people have, right? Sometimes it seems like the wicked people, they don't have any pain at all. They're just going fine. You know,
Exactly.
why is it that some elderly presidents seem like they have lost their mental capacity, and some elderly presidents are just like, totally fine? Like what is it that makes it seem like some people have troubles and some people don't have troubles? And this psalm, right? Oh, I purified my heart in vain. I scrubbed my hands clean in vain, but I have been plagued all day, chastised every morning. Every morning
Exactly.
I wake up feeling, oh, another day of pain. All right. Well, yeah, there's a lot in this psalm on that. Mark.
Yeah, Rabbi, could you tell us a little bit about Asaph?
Yeah, for sure. Asaph is mentioned in the book of Chronicles, and I brought you this section. Chronicles, 1 Chronicles chapter 16, verses 4 through 7 reads, David appointed Levites, so David, that's King David, appointed Levites to minister before the ark of God to invoke, to praise, and to extol the eternal God of Israel. Asaph was the chief of these Levites. Zechariah was the second. Then there was also Yeiel, Shemiramoth, Yechiel, Matityaah, Eliav, Benaiah, and Oved Edom. Right? Just basically a list of these Levites. And what did they do? They used harps and lyres, and Asaph sounded the cymbals, and Benaiah and Yahaziel were with trumpets, and they would sing in front of the Ark of the Covenant of God. And on that day, David first commissioned Asaph and his kindred to give praise to God. In other words, this was a group of singing Levites. They were a spiritual band, a, a you know, a rock band for the ages, right? Rock of ages, you know. Um, uh, and uh, and David the king commissioned them to write poetry. I mean songs, to sing to God.
Like
And
a
so
real building.
this is the first one that is labeled such. Remember that we finished the last time we met. We read Psalm 72 was the end of the second book of Psalms, and we're now beginning the third book of Psalms. And the third book of Psalms begins with some Asaph psalms, and Asaph, and who Asaph is, right? David appointed these Levites under Asaph to write some psalms, and to be included in the book of Psalms. And we know, at least traditionally, we know that David also was a poet who also wrote psalms, and many of the ones that we read in the first two books of Psalms are attributed to David. Maybe even David himself wrote some of them, but certainly, David was a patron of the arts. He couldn't build the temple because God told him that he couldn't do that because his hands were too bloody. But he found another way to offer praise to God, which was to commission these works of musical art. So that's who Asaph is. Yeah, Murray.
It sounds a little bit like Asaph is reflecting on his life from youth, when things may have been different, when his body was functioning properly, no pain, and he was in the inner circle and maybe even the head of one of the choirs, etc. And now he, like us, has aged a little bit and has seen the ups and downs of life, has experienced the ups and downs of life, and maybe has had some disappointments. And so he reflects on that, but nevertheless projects himself as always being loyal, adhering to God, and having God as his salvation. And so that is the hope that Asaph expresses here.
All right. Murray says, well, like Natalie, Murray sees a lot of the lines of this poem being about the failing body of old age. The Asaph, as an older person, is remembering the ease of his faith in God as a youth. When my body worked, it was so easy to have faith in God. When everything seemed like it was going well, I was pure of heart. But now that I wake up every morning in pain, it is so much harder to sustain that faith. And yet, right, God, you have been there this whole time. You're holding my hand. You're with me, right? Now, I I totally hear that, and I think that is a beautiful read of this psalm. But it does miss a big portion of at least what for me comes up in this psalm, which is that what really is causing the shakiness of his faith is not just his physical pain, but also his existential question of why it seems like the wicked people don't have pain? Why is it, God, that the wicked seem to grow fat in their luxury? Why is it that the wicked people are able to say whatever they want with impunity? Why is it that they amass wealth and honor and whatever? And I'm just like here trying to stay holy and trying to stay pure, and my life is so hard. And it's sort of this question I think of, man, why is righteousness so difficult? Like it's much easier to cut corners. It's much easier to be wicked in some ways.
Can we read the English translation of Ophed?
Which English translation would you like to read?
The Psalm of Asaph.
We can read, yeah, sure. The King James version here.
King James, yes.
All right. King James has this translation, a Psalm of Asaph. Truly God is good to Israel, even to such as are of a clean heart. But as for me, my feet were almost gone, my steps had well nigh slipped. For I was envious at the foolish, when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. For there are no bands in their death, but their strength is firm. They are not in trouble as other men, neither are they plagued like other men. Therefore pride compasseth about them as a chain. Violence covereth them as a garment. Their eyes stand out with fatness. They have more than heart could wish. They are corrupt, and speak wickedly concerning oppression. They speak loftily. They set their mouth against the heavens, and their tongue walketh through the earth. Therefore his people return hither, and waters of a full cup are wrung out to them. And they say, how doth God know? Is there knowledge in the Most High? Behold, these are the ungodly, who prosper in the world, they increase in riches. Verily, I have cleansed my heart in vain, and washed my hands in innocency. For all the day long I have been plagued, and chastened every morning. If I say I will speak thus, behold, I should offend against the generation of thy children. When I thought to know this, it was too painful for me, until I went into the sanctuary of God. Then understood I their end. Surely thou didst set them in slippery places. Thou castest them down into destruction. How they are brought into desolation, as in a moment. They are utterly consumed with terrors. As a dream when one awaketh, so, O Lord, when thou awaketh, thou shalt despise their image. Thus my heart was grieved, and I was prickled in my reins, so foolish was I and ignorant. I was as a beast before thee. Nevertheless, I am continually with thee. Thou hast holden me by my right hand. Thou shalt guide me with thy counsel, and afterward receive me to glory. Whom have I in heaven but thee? There is none upon earth that I desire beside thee. My flesh and my heart faileth, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. For lo, they that are far from thee shall perish. Thou hast destroyed all them that go a whoring from thee. But it is good for me to draw near to God. I have put my trust in the Lord God, that I may declare all thy works.
Oh,
So we talked a little bit about what emotions rise up for us when we read this psalm, and we talked a little bit about Asaph. I'm curious to know if you were going to use this psalm as a prayer, or if what kind of moment would you be in when you would want to share this psalm?
when I see the people who are um, criminals in some way, and they're not being punished, they seem to just enjoy their lives anyway. Um, it, it would be um, a feeling of something's wrong with this world,
Mm,
that they're getting away with this, and there's no godly involvement anywhere in their lives. They just do evil and no harm has come to them.
Yeah.
There's a little bitterness there.
I think there's a lot of bitterness there.
There is.
Yeah. And sort of, how can there not be, right? I think this is a perennial problem among folks who are trying to live a righteous life. That sometimes it feels like it's hard to choose righteousness all the time. But it seems like people who take an easier path get immediately rewarded for it with wealth, with honor, with whatever.
Exactly.
Oh, that's so frustrating. And yet the Asaph does seem to say, right? But God is with me. God is holding my hand. God is the strength of my heart. Rabbi Spitzer, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, not yet.
Okay. All right. So this psalm is not quoted in our Jewish prayer service even once. I couldn't find any connection of any of the phrases of this psalm to anywhere in Jewish prayer.
Hmm.
What do you make of that?
Hmm. It's kind of surprising, actually. There seems to be a lot in it that could be used in prayer.
All right, say more.
I'm trying to marshal my thoughts, and I'm not doing very well. Um, no, it just seems that he covers a lot of ground, and especially with the evil are getting away with this, and but God is there for me. Um, I would think there'd be something in there that would be applicable to prayer.
Jewish prayer tends to be communal. And this psalm is very individual.
That's true. But we've seen many, many cases where a psalm is written in the first person singular, in its original context, it's clearly a very personal, individual psalm, and the rabbis have no trouble just changing the tense of the psalm to plural, and taking it, right. We just saw a few weeks ago, right? We a prayer that God not cast cast the speaker aside in old age, right? And we use that verse from Psalms regularly in our Yom Kippur service and in our Slichot service leading up to Yom Kippur. But the rabbis just changed it from Al Ta'azveini, right? Don't leave me behind, to Al Ta'azveinu, don't leave us behind. Don't reject us. So it is true that this psalm is written in the singular and has this very personal crisis of faith. Um, but I don't know that in itself is sufficient reason that it wasn't brought into Jewish prayer. Um, so it happens that when I find no examples of the use of a particular psalm in Jewish liturgy, I search the internet uh and the what few hymnals I have. I search to see whether it is used in Christian prayer. Not because I think that is necessarily always the case, but I'm always curious to know if we've left a psalm behind, has everybody left it behind, or is it used in some context? And Psalm 73, according to my Google searching, is frequently used in churches for sermons, for worship, and for study. Why? Because its teachings and themes about doubt, jealousy, and divine justice resonate very deeply with modern believers who are experiencing suffering. It is used to teach how to move from frustration over injustices to trust in God's presence. Many sermons use this psalm to address the question, why do the wicked prosper? Sometimes it is used to highlight the transition from doubt to worship, particularly verse 17 here, right? Until I entered God's sanctuary, then I perceived what their destiny would be. In other words, right, this psalm itself suggests what you should do when you feel doubt and the answer that the psalm gives. When you look around and you see that all the wicked are prospering and you're frustrated, what does the psalmist say to do? The psalmist says, go to worship, right? Go enter God's sanctuary, enter the house of prayer, go to synagogue, go to church, whatever it is, go there, and then you will see the full picture. You will realize that God is testing these people, that they are going to get their just desserts, right? And in the Anglican tradition, this is the appointed reading for the 14th day of the month every month, right? And I think I think that's an important uh um well, I don't know very much about the Anglican Book of Common Prayer, but what I can say is this: if you're assigning this to the 14th day of the month, you are saying, like, in a spiritual arc of a month, right? It's possible that in the middle of the month, you need a reminder about the about faith, about turning toward tradition, about that God is still holding your hand, even if you feel like other folks are prospering in their wickedness. Um, I do think it's really interesting that the Jewish tradition does not use this at all, and I think that part of the reason that we don't is because um, I think the answer here is not satisfactory. I think that I mean the problem that is addressed in this psalm, which is why does it feel like some wicked people prosper and but I, who am trying so hard to be righteous, I am filled with pain, right? That is a problem that I don't think has an easy answer. And I don't know that Judaism like really latches on to this answer of, oh, just go to church and it will be okay. Um, that feels too pat, too easy for me. Like, it doesn't really get to the core heart of the issue. So that's why I think that we don't use this psalm in Judaism. I think the rabbis were uncomfortable with the content. I mean, not with like the process, right? Like Asaph is clearly struggling with this, and the questions that Asaph brings are good. Right? That's another aspect, I think. I think Jewish prayer, um, Jewish, I don't think it's in general, I don't have the experience of um I think in some ways our tefillot assume a kind of faith, or not necessarily faith, but just assume that we're going to say the words regardless of whether we have faith. Um, and are not necessarily focused on really uh dealing with it or challenging it or I don't know. I'm not saying that exactly right. My first thing was better about how it's not a good answer. Yeah, Murray.
Well, I think the remarkable conclusion here is that the person who has practiced the faith and had his or her ups and downs, in the end sees that the only salvation really is to continue the faith and find consolation and hope that holding the hand of God will somehow bring some relief.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh, what do you think, Ima? I a little bit didn't agree with your answer, but did you think that mine was a little bit better? I don't know.
Um, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about the idea, do we reject easy answers? And I think that's also a little too easy to say.
Yeah, that's fair.
Um, I have to think about it. I will though.
Yeah.
Go back to verse 22.
All right. Verse 22.
I think there's any place in the Torah or the prayers that I was called a dimwit.
Yeah,
Or on
that's
the
an
other
interesting
side,
point.
I was stupid and ignorant. I was like a beast. I
Right.
don't I don't see that as a Jewish
Vani
motif.
bar veloe da behemot hayiti imach, right? The impulse to call ourselves a beast, uneducated, a bore, a dimwit, right? That line feels to Natalie like particularly un-Jewish. If we're looking for a reason why this psalm wasn't incorporated into Tefillah, maybe we can look at that line and be like, that just doesn't feel consistent with other ways that we self-describe in Tfilot. And I think that's probably true. I can't off the top of my head think of a place where we do this. And indeed, when the spies come back in the book of Numbers and they say, they were giants and we were like grasshoppers in their eyes, right? The that's an example of like comparing ourselves to bugs that popped into my head, right? They get they get slammed for that, right? 40 years of wandering in the desert for their lack of faith, for their trying to imagine what the inhabitants of the land of Israel, what they thought about the Jewish people, right? For trying to for putting themselves down in that way, they got 40 years of wandering in the desert. So at least in that respect, Natalie, I think you're right. Like the generally the Jewish tradition is sort of opposed um to putting yourself down in that way. I I think the sense of it, however, is not actually about um comparing yourself to an animal. I think the sense of it is that by the end of the psalm, after Asaph has had his like wake up moment in the sanctuary, right? He's upset, he's has all these doubts, and then he goes to the sanctuary and he has this aha moment. Oh, I get it now. God, you are testing the wicked. You're throwing all this stuff at them. Like they are going to get what's coming to them, you know. Um, and once he has that, then he describes his doubting self as brutish and ignorant. He describes how he was at the beginning of the psalm as like a beast who had no understanding. I get this the sense of that is that his point is there are these moments of inspiration or revelation where you get an answer to your question, and then how you feel about yourself before you got that answer is like, how could I not have seen it? How could I not have realized? How did I not know that God was there all along? And so I don't know. Like, I agree with you that if you just look at that line feels discontinuous with other Jewish prayers. But in the context of the poem of the psalm, I think it sort of is trying to capture that sense of um radical transformation that Asaph has experienced as a result of his going to the sanctuary of God. And it's such a radical transformation that he self-describes that current, like, now I am human. Before, I was as if I was a beast. Like, I was so unaware of God's presence in the world. But now I get it. Now I get it. That's what I think the sense is to me. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Am I muted or am I on?
You're on.
Um, as you're talking, I think there's something else here too. I think I think the bulk of this, you phrased it as the doubts that we have when we look around the world and say, how is it that I try so hard and the wicked seem to prosper so easily? Um, but a lot of the sum is also about the wicked and what will happen to them, or even what is happening to them, which is a little of a reach. Um, and maybe Jewish prayer isn't so much about what's happening to other people, or what's happening to other peoples. Um, and maybe that's part of it also. We're not a lot of our prayer is exulting in how bad it's going to be for other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Asking the questions. Now there's a how can it be? I'm not even sure. I think that's very Jewish, but I'm not sure that's very Jewish liturgically. Prayer might not be the right time for that in Jewish prayer.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm just thinking out loud.
No, I appreciate it. I think there's it's a when I was preparing this psalm, I felt like unsure. Like, there are parts of me that really, really resonate with this psalm, sort of like what Natalie was saying at the beginning. Like, there's a lot of parts of this psalm that deeply resonate and that feel modern, right? That feel like completely like this psalm could have been written yesterday. I Would every piece of it be the same if it was written now? No, but I think it, like, there's a lot of it that feels really, really relevant. And I can understand why this might be used in sermons. You know, I've never heard a Jewish sermon reflect on this psalm. But maybe I should. Maybe I should bring Psalm 73. I don't know. Mark.
Sometimes I think it's a question of because it's important to non-Jews, it's not, therefore it's not important to us. Almost like they like it, we don't. That
Yeah.
that kind of I don't know if I'm expressing it well, but do you know what
No,
I
I mean,
mean? That, because
I
we do certain because Christians do certain things, therefore we will not do them.
yeah, I not being an expert in the history of the adaptation of Psalms to each of the traditions. I can't say that with certainty. But part of what leads me when I get to a psalm that has zero connections to Jewish liturgy, part of what leads me to ask the question, oh, is this often used in Christian liturgy? Is exactly that point that you're making, which is sometimes it feels like we just sort of divided the psalms, like divide and conquer, like, okay, like maybe the reason why the rabbis disassociated with this psalm is because there was a tradition of using it in Christian in churches. Um, I I don't know. I don't know. We did talk about that a little bit when we talked about Psalm 22, which Psalm 22 seems, first of all, Psalm 22 is the one that starts Eli, Eli, Lama Zavtani, right? My God, you have forsaken me, which is which is what Jesus had written on the cross above him, in many depictions of a crucifixion. Like that's what's there. Like Jesus says that in his last moments of life um, on the cross. And when you read certain passages from Matthew and Luke from the Gospels, from the Christian Bible, it seems clear that either it seems clear that they had the text of the psalm with them and that they were writing basically a midrash on the psalm, like that the passion of the Christ, that the story of Jesus being being crucified is a midrash on Psalm 22. And I I can't imagine that the early rabbis were not aware of this midrash. Right? They must have known that this is how it was being how Psalm 22 was being used in Christian contexts. And interestingly, because today is Purim, right? The rabbis respond to that, especially the Babylonian rabbis, by writing counter midrashim that describe Psalm 22 as being related to Esther and Mordecai's relationship to God. Um, of course, God is absent. The name of God is absent from the Megillah. And one of the ways that the rabbis respond to that in the Midrash is by tying in Psalm 22 to the story of Mordecai and Esther. And so, but Psalm 22 is very much not used in Jewish prayer. And in fact, like you almost never hear it read in synagogue. And even its midrashim that are connected to the scroll of Esther, like there's no song that we sing on Purim that invokes Psalm 22, even though there's that midrashic connection. Like, no, we don't use Psalm 22. And a lot of my suspicion has to do with the fact that Psalm 22 was taken by the Christians and used, the early Christians.
But this one isn't as
This one is not as obvious, right? No, Psalm 73 is not like that. It's not like there's a passage from the New Testament that's a midrash
yeah.
on Psalm 73. It's just different. On the other hand, like it's not impossible that what you're saying is right. I just don't know. Um, I do think it's really interesting the way that different communities latch on to different psalms. We spend a lot, like we're not there yet, but when we get to Psalm 90 and 91, like these are psalms that are everywhere in our service. And um and I don't know whether they're used in the same way in Christian prayer. I just don't know. I do think that the theme of this psalm, which is like faith and doubt and justice and evil and whatever, like those themes are more talked about in Christian theology than they are talked about in Jewish theology. Like, I don't think Jews spend a lot of time talking about doubt. I mean, more in post-Holocaust Jewish world, but for most of Jewish history, believe in God or don't believe in God, like, you know, think that you're going to be rewarded in the afterlife or don't think that you're going to be rewarded in the afterlife. Like, these are not questions that are that relevant. What we care about is that you give mishloach manot to your friends and show up to hear the Purim story. Like the Jews just have a different sort of feeling on this topic. I think. I mean, it's not totally fair, but that's also a sense that I get. All right, I brought you this spiritual application from Rabbi Richard Levy. He writes, to see wicked people getting away with their misdeeds can be one of the most traumatic challenges to a person's faith in God. Particularly if we have tried to live an honest life and have not been rewarded with either others' goodwill or with material benefits. To see a dishonest, conniving person basking in others' esteem may embitter us, may make us feel the yeast of resentment rising in us. To believe that miscreants will meet their fate in the world to come, which is a rabbinic teaching, may not be sufficient comfort, particularly if we are not sure what that world will look like. The response of this psalm's author is a disarming one. Don't focus on the seeming good life of the bad person. Rather, seek God's presence yourself. Bring your doubts and your heartache to God. Right? I think that's a beautiful way of reading the psalm. He says, it's not about the it's not about going to the sanctuary, going to God's house and getting an answer to your question of why does good stuff happen to bad people. It's about going to the sanctuary and having an experience of connection with God. As the poet has found God in holy places, we might frequent such places as well. Not only the synagogue, but also beautiful places in nature, in soaring buildings, places where we can be surrounded by music that speaks to us, by art or people who raise our spirits, places where we can let God's presence in, settings where we feel the omnipresent God may dwell more palpably than other places. We may not like the invidious comparison suggested by this psalm, that we can come close to God while the wicked cannot. We may feel that the right thing to do is not to envy wicked people, but to try to help them change their ways. Still, at the moment when we feel that the world is unfair, that God does not hear our just cries, it may be the most effective course to seek out God's presence, as the poet suggests. In the end, the goal is to change our tale, to be able to tell a story of how we have discovered fairness in the world, how we have become more convinced of the presence of a just and caring God, a God who is good for us. Such a tale is not easy to construct, but like the construction of any work of art, the process of searching for it, of finding the pieces for it, of trying to put them together is a worthy goal for our life. Theodicy, that is dealing with God's justice, is not a theology. It's a lifelong process. Or you might say it's a lifelong process of art. It's a lifelong process of artistic expression.
I I think that's beautiful. I think that's really beautiful. I think he did a beautiful job of writing that, and I think we can learn a lot from it. I'm dubious that that's what the psalm means.
Yeah, I mean, look, when I read this psalm and I get to the turn in verse 17, until I'd go into the holy gates of God when I understood their ultimate undoing. How I read that verse is that he goes to the holy places, the holy gates of God, and he gets an answer to his question. He finds out that the wicked people are going to get their just deserts, right? Even though it looks like they might be prospering, in the end, they're not going to prosper. God's going to take them out. That is how I read that verse. I do not read it the way that Rabbi Richard Levy read it or interpreted it, where he says that the point here is not getting an answer to that question. The point is going to ask that question to God and therefore being in community with God, of having a sense of relationship and communion with God. And that sense of communion, that can change everything, right? So I agree with you, Rabbi Spitzer. I think that it's a stretch. I think that it is not the most obvious reading of that verse. I think the most obvious reading is you go to church and you get an answer of what happens to the seemingly the wicked who seemingly get off free. You find out that God's going to get them in the end. I think that is the plain sense of the psalm. But I really love his interpretation because it fits much more with my own personal theology, which is that a relationship with God can profoundly change your way of being in the world. You might not get the answers that you are looking for about why the wicked prosper, but your relationship with God can change how you interact with the world. So I think his answer is profoundly Jewish, and it deeply resonates with me. But I agree that it isn't the most obvious reading of the psalm, which probably he knew. All right. Well, we've come to the end of our hour. Simchat Purim. The goal is to meet again next week on the 10th of March to do Psalm 74. Thank you,
Yasher
everybody.
koach. Yasher koach and Simchat Purim to everybody.
Thank you.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
חג שמח.